It's May 19th, 2016. I'm Sue Cohen with the San Marcos Heritage Association, and I have the distinct pleasure today of interviewing Buddy Mosten, one of the leaders in tourism for many years, the owner of Wonder World Cave and Park. And so, Buddy, why don't you start by telling me about how your family came to San Marcos and when that was?
Okay. Sue, I'm glad to be here. My family originated, or my mother was, in Galveston, Texas. Her father ran the Murdoch's Pier that sticks out over the water today even, is still in our family. We had a family split at sometime around 1956-57, and my dad put out the word that he was looking to move up into hill country, which he dearly loved. He loved to hunt and fish and so on like that. So we ran into a character called Ralph Marker. Ralph Marker at the time was actually running and leasing the actual park itself from, it was Paul Rogers that he was leasing from. Paul Rogers was A.B. Rogers' son. He followed A.B., and A.B. was the developer of the cave. In 1903, he started to actually commercialize the cave for tours, and that's when it started, and it's run since then continuously, year-round. So we've got about 115 years now going on this thing. I came along in 1957 and started working for my dad for 25 cents an hour, putting on bumper strips and learning the business. And I continued to work there through all of junior high school, and college. I was the Vietnam War was going on, and so it was a must that I must be in college. So I was in Brenham at the time. My dad actually passed away on October 16, 1967.
And what was your dad and mom's name?
That was T.J. Mosten. They called him T.J., or tomato juice, as Margaret from Ocarina Springs used to say. My mom was Phyllis Brace, which was, her maiden name was Guyette. Anyway, they used to have the Old Dallas Hotel down in Galveston. They own a big section of the Strand, which is nowadays very popular. Back then it was hollowed buildings, really.
Now, was your father in tourism in Galveston with the pier, or what did he do before he moved up here?
When he retired from the Air Force, he was offered a position with my grandfather to help run the pier, along with my uncle, which didn't work out real well, but that's why we came up to San Marcos at that point. But that was not my dad's chosen field. He was actually, when the war broke out, was a geology major at the University of Texas. So this all fits. He loved the cave and the idea of running the cave. That was his background. So when the opportunity came to take in a half of a lease partnership agreement with Ralph Marker from Paul Rogers, my dad took it up, came up here, and it was shortly thereafter Ralph Marker wanted to sell the other half, and Dad purchased that part of the lease. And Paul and my T.J. Mosten became very close friends, and they ran all over the country buying up items like the Texana Village and setting it all up, and they had a lot of fun.
And Paul was running
He was running Ocarina Springs, which A.B. Rogers, his father, is the one who developed the cave, and then afterwards bought up all of the springs area and developed the first known Ocarina Springs. So that came from Florida. Actually, they brought that idea, the submarine theater, and brought it up. So it became one of the most popular places in all of Texas. There was really, back in 1957, there was just 3 major tourist attractions: the Alamo, Ocarina Springs, and Wonder Cave. And Dad, of course, kind of was a developer of the sign program back then, where you could literally just walk up to a farmer and say, "Yeah, I want to put a sign on your farm." "Oh, go ahead," you know. Nowadays it's very, very lucrative business, but back then.
That's when the family vacation was to get in the car and you could go to all 3, I guess.
That's right. You would normally do. You'd come to the hill country, and we were the popular place. We were basically, there wasn't Canyon Lake. Wimberley was not known very much of. So you're really down to camping or going, so Labor Day, Memorial Days, and major holiday, it truly was impacted with tourism coming to the cave and coming to Ocarina. I can remember that the crowds would back up beyond the golf course at Ocarina Springs, and it was just tremendous flow of people. I think when they finally retired Ocarina from the tourism side of it, they were close to 250,000 to 300,000 visitors a year. The cave was never quite that big, but we ran a pretty good tail on them. So whatever they did, we got to ride over on. So it was a great sister of attractions there.
Mm-hmm. Put San Marcos on the map, really. What we were known for back then was tourism.
Well, back then, we didn't have DTA, which Texas Tourist Development Agency. It was started by Paul and TJ and a few other hand-picked people, and they hired a man called Jim Battersby, which took over that, and which you remember Jim Battersby.
Yeah.
He had it, and his son ran it for a while, and then after that, after they retired or passed, the state actually took it. It's now called TTDA, Texas Tourist Development Agency, and they're politically inclined, so like that. But this is how the organization developed, and over the years, it's a very powerful organization. We're glad to have them. Along with that, they had pulled in the Texas Highway Department. Back then, we had Tom Taylor, the great white father. He kind of oversaw the highway and helped develop the highway department to have a branch of tourism, tourist information stations leading in. I think there's 11 of them in the state now. They literally guide millions of people per year to our area. And of course, Central Texas has always been a favorite. You know,
right.
We're in God's country right here, so it's a natural.
Yeah. So in 1957, y'all moved here from Galveston. How old were you, and where did y'all live?
10 years old.
10. Okay.
We moved into a little house on Sycamore Street, which nowadays, back then, it was actually the family street. I mean, every family and I grew up with these kids always from elementary, junior high school, college, and we're still close friends. A little Wimberley group, our Martindale group, and San Marcos group, but we all merged on around Sycamore and Field Street, and that was also developed by A.B. Rogers, that whole area. Our fun spot, of course, is get on our bicycle with taking our fenders off and having, and riding around town, and Rio Vista at that point was the spot to go swimming. There wasn't any swimming pools or anything like that, so everybody merged down there. And there used to be like a 35-foot tower that we had a trolley that you could climb up, pull the rope up, and get the trolley and swing and ride all the way across the river and land, or you could jump off. And of course, at 10 years old, 35 feet up in the air was a long ways to jump, and I had to build on nerves, but I got it down. But there used to be also, to the left, it had a flume ride, and there was a bathhouse back there, which they used to play music out of, like Buddy Holly and the Purple People Eater and that type of thing. It was fun. It was lots of fun, and all the kids were there. There used to be a little island out in the middle that you could swim over to. It was deep water too. We used to climb up on the railroad crossing bridge and jump off and dive off of that. So it was all the activities right there in that area. We didn't swim much further down the river than that. That was the deepest part of the river. So it was fairly clean and deep, so you could jump off, of course. I don't know if it's deep anymore. I don't know. They used to have trapeze that hung out over the water. There, off to the left of the tower, there was a concrete wall that they built up, and they had 4 trapeze that you could swing out and flip into the water. I think that's where Mr. Coggin crippled himself from Coggin's jewelry store. He was an athlete, and he was doing performing, and he slammed up against a concrete wall that put him on crutches the rest of his life. But that's the kind of thing where we go back.
Great place to grow up.
Right.
Different than it is today.
The downtown was simple. You knew everybody, from Miller's Drugstore, the Lamar Barber Shop, to we had 2 theaters, the Palace Theater and Holiday Inn were owned by Zimmerman's. Next door to that was Papa's Cafe, with famous old cafe that everybody loved. We had Red Simon Ford on the corner. On the other side of town, we had Kirchhoff Pontiac, you know, and the old Greyhound bus station that was started and never completed, where Nelson Center is right there. The college was way up on the hill.
Why wasn't the bus station completed?
They poured concrete columns and everything, got it up to a certain point, and I don't know the history of why it stopped, but Nelson Center, when it was bought out, they leveled all that and built Nelson Center right there. We had, of course, Dempsey Saruer and the Varsity Shop and Mr. Wood, Jack Woods that had Woods clothing store. Next to that was Williams Ladies, and then don't forget, we had the Frontier shop too.
Right.
That's the western side. That was our shopping. And if you needed something for hardware, you had Clyde's Hardware Store. And next to that was Holt's Grocery Store, where Mom would just call up and they would deliver groceries and bill her at the end of the month. Every place in town had a charge account. You never used cash. Go in, you want Dempsey to charge you a shirt, pair of pants, or something like that. Well, Dad got the bill at the end of the month, so I had no restrictions growing up.
Who were some of the kids, and what year did you graduate from San Marcos High School? And you said you're friends with who were some of the buddies that's still around today?
Well, Tommy Coggin, of course, is still around. Marion Martin, Laura Loss, Frank Thompson, and of course, that list is long.
What year did you graduate from high school?
1966. That was the year we went to one state, and that was one of the best basketball, football, everything we had. We were the winningest group of kids ever in San Marcos High School.
Wow.
That was Gordon Clunker, Rox Goodwine, John Holstrom, Steve Meeks. They're all, well, of course, John has passed, but all the rest of them are still around.
From the state football championship.
Yes, ma'am. We went from AA, AAA, 4A, and we were AAA at that time when we won that.
That's pretty exciting, and that was when the high school was on Highway 123.
Yes. We also went to state in debate with Mike Frazier, I believe it was.
How many kids in your graduating class? I mean, the
it
high
was
school
275 or right in that area. We also had, that was the little band called was Bill York and all the boys that were still around. We had, just before that, we had Pennington.
The Traits.
Roy Head. That was just the time. And
so for fun in high school, y'all went to the movies, you drove around. What'd y'all do for fun after school?
Well, we actually spent most of our time between Big Willie's and the Sonic. We went up and down 123 to see who was at what place at what time.
What was your car in high school?
I had a Volkswagen. But it was a cool Volkswagen. It's a well-known historical Volkswagen.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, oh yeah. Oh yeah, it has a lot of things going on with that thing. It was something to do with being able to convert my windshield wiper into where nobody would suspect it, but it had a nozzle in the glove compartment so we can mix, anyway, sodas.
With your windshield wipers?
Had a push button. It did it by air compression.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, it was well known. It
Now y'all moved
got
from
around.
the house on Sycamore Street to where?
Well, from there we moved up to Rogers Ridge at that time.
Okay.
Rogers Ridge, which is a real small area that that was developed by Paul,
Uh-huh.
and there was probably a dozen houses up there. We had people like Don Russell that ran Ocarina Springs lived up there, which was fun to have them as next door neighbors. We had Scott Russell, which was the pro for the golf course down below. We had ourselves. We had Mrs. Penny Rogers that lived in the old homestead.
What's the name of that street today? Is it?
Don't know.
It's up above Ocarinas where y'all
Yeah.
lived.
That was Mrs. Penny, or Penny Rogers. She was a sweet lady. I used to go ride my bicycle over and visit with her. And of course, on the backyard, you could overlook down on the lake. That was some place. It still is.
And you have one brother?
I have two brothers.
Two brothers.
Both of them were in the tourism industry for a while. They
Uh-huh.
all worked at the cave with my dad. My oldest went off to the Navy. The middle brother was hired to work at Six Flags at the Indian Village. The older brother, when he came back out of the Navy, was hired by Six Flags as overall manager, training to actually run the park. From there, when my dad died, John was, by necessity, was asked to come back to run the cave because I was still in college. So he did. He quit his job, came back, ran the cave. Afterwards, Ciarama in Galveston hired him. And at that point, I was ready to step up. My parents did not want to run the cave. And that was around 1971 when I graduated. Southwest Texas back then.
That was your mom and your stepfather.
Mhm.
She married Mr. Brace after your dad
Right.
died.
Mr. Brace was heavy in tourism in Corpus Christi. He was one of the city council members. They were friends before my dad passed away, and his wife passed away at the same year. So my mom and Jim Brace got together in
What year was that?
1968. So we all flew off to Vegas and got them married, and my mom lived with him and lived happily for another 25 to 30 years. Married to my dad for 25 years, so she married almost all of her life, that's for sure, but happy. She was a very happy lady. So anyway, I came along willing. They did not want to run the cave at their age. They were retired and did not want to come back. They were trying to do it, and they were not doing very well. So I did agree to come back if they would sponsor me, or as far as letting me buy the cave. So we got to an agreement that we bought my two other brothers out with my inheritance from my dad, and then they carried me for 30 years. So I could go ahead and purchase the cave. So
Well, you were pretty young. You were right out of college when you did that.
22 years old
Wow.
in 1972. And I took over that responsibility. Jim stayed around for a little while to make sure and help me because his livelihood depended on it too. But I stayed with it. It's now about 45 years later. I'm looking for somebody to come take over me. Let me go. I want to travel too now.
Time flies, doesn't it?
I had fun. It's a great place.
So tell me some of this. I know there's a lot of history with the cave, the changes that have happened over the years. Can you run through those?
Nobody really thinks the cave is growing, but it grows by leaps and bounds every year. There's all kind of subtle changes that go on, additions go on. It does not stay stagnant. Starting with the cave had back in 1967 or 57, the cave had one string of lights down the center with light bulbs hanging, and it had no indirect lighting, no effect lighting or anything. So I had a friend that turned out to be the one that took over and ran Anheuser-Busch Corporation, John Roberts. John Roberts and I worked together down in the cave, hour after hour after hour, pulling wire, doing lighting effects, indirect lighting, hiding wires under the asphalt, and we did. My dad just turned it over to us, and we went through that thing slowly, and it's still there today. It's a very effective lighting system throughout the cave. It really exposes the cave in a good light.
And it's a different kind of cave. It's an earthquake formed
Yeah,
cave. Tell us
so
a little history of the cave
Okay, I'm glad you asked that.
and how it was discovered.
As far as the caves are concerned, or a cave is concerned, this is a jewel for the state of Texas. This cave is like no other cave that's open to the public anywhere in the United States. You're actually going into and descending deep within the inside part of where the earth is torn apart. And this rip apart comes all the way down from Ardmore, Oklahoma, down to Dallas, down to Austin, to San Marcos, heads on through New Braunfels, San Antonio, takes a slow turn to Del Rio, goes into Mexico. About 980 some odd miles of fault line that was created in some 3.5 minutes. This is the dividing point between the Edwards Plateau, the uplift, and the Gulf Coastal Plain region of the state of Texas. Now, these two segments of Earth split apart and moved in separate directions. Farming at that point was covered by water, ocean water, and that's the beginning of where the water actually started to descend and recede from this area. And so what you see from, say, the tower, when you go up in the tower, this is a new addition that we put in about 1968, 69, that I put in. This thing, you can get up there and you can actually see the hill country come to an end. And the rockiness, the roughness, and it goes off into the Gulf Coastal Plain region, which is your farm belt. I mean, it's just right there at the cave. You look straight down at it, you can see it, you can follow the cave north and south, which the cave does run. So the cave is tremendously unique because no other place can you enter into an earthquake and actually see what Mother Nature's devastating forces is all about. I mean, golly, we go down to the water table, which is about 160 feet below the surface, and the cave goes much, much deeper. We had, in my dad's time, we had Ezel's Cave, which is on Brown Street, and we actually put a dinghy out in the middle of that thing and dropped string, tied them together, kite string. There were 500 feet per, and it went straight down and never touched. So that gives you an idea of the depth of that water right there in that spot. I don't know if it's a pocket, but sometimes the water just infiltrates the limestone rock, so it may not have just a body of water, but there it does. You can actually swim in that area. It also houses some of the blind salamander, shrimp, and all types of, so it was highly sensitive, and that's the reason my dad saw it, that he did not want people going down there. So he gave the stewardship to the University of Texas. Stipulation, they could never commercialize it or use it for any other purposes, for conservation purposes only. And I think Texas State finally got it as given by the university over for us to take care of it. And that's where it's at right now today. It still houses some of the most unique animal life that I got to actually see as a young child, and it was really interesting. We had a diver back then. His family name was Nicole, Joe Nicola. That's what it was, Joe Nicola. He was just freshly out as a Navy SEAL, and he was doing a lot of the diving exploration down in Ezel. What we were trying to do, or my dad's idea, was to try to find a underwater passageway from Ezel's, which is not that far, back over to the wishing well of the cave. He always envisioned having an underwater walkthrough and come up over there and have a sky ride back over to the cave. I mean, that was that was his plan. And never could really work that out. I mean, we never found that wishing well. It was just too hard. So I don't even know if it could be done. But that's the Ezel's cave portion. In our cave, there's still signs of blind salamanders and stuff, but you don't see them that often. They're there, but they're all through the aquifer. They're not just to Ocarina Springs. The body of water here runs from Uvalde all the way to Georgetown, and it runs from a south to a north direction, and it flows pretty amazing. It's actually, you can see it, and it does rise and fall with the rainfalls. Or like right now, it's probably pretty high. But I've seen it. We're in drought times over the last 3 years. We barely have water in our wishing well, but you know, that's probably a 15-foot drop, you know, in levels. So it does fluctuate. This is all fed by the hill country runoff for the last 25 miles in a northwest direction. The landscape, because of the uplift, drops about 1.5 feet per mile, and all this water and rain precipitates down through the limestone sedimentary substance and is purified and starts coming down toward the cave and other pockets. Eventually ends up right here at the fault line. The reason why it stops at the fault line is because the earth has shifted. And now you have a natural damming effect that holds the water back because the water cannot run you. That's why it turns and goes north and south. And you have other, like the Devil's Sinkhole that feeds into it. So we're not only from Uvalde fed, we're fed from other directions too. But our aquifer is in good shape right now, I can promise you that.
Now, how was the cave discovered? I know there's stories that there was gambling, and tell us some of those historical stories of the cave.
That's before my time.
I know, but you've
So
heard
it's
these.
hearsay.
Okay.
But our tour goes basically that A.B. Rogers bought the cave for a horse and a saddle, and at first the local gentleman, it was the coolest place in town. I mean, we didn't have air conditioning. We had an old ice plant that right there at where the Ocarina Springs peppers used to be, and
Saltgrass is
saltgrass
there now.
But that used to be an old ice house. You used to put a quarter in there, get a big old tub of ice that comes down. But anyway, that was the coolest place temperature-wise, and all they had to do is go down to the first room, and they had it set up with little benches around there, an old kerosene lamp, and where they hung the lamp is still there today. You can still see that. And they would sit there and, of course, gamble. And it was just a neat place to get out of the hot sun in the summertime. So that's what it was for until one of the wives got wise to what they were doing. And that's how A.B. got to buy the cave at that point. So that was Mark Beavers that was actually hosting the gambling parties.
And so A.B. Rogers bought it from Beavers.
Yes.
For a horse and a saddle?
Yeah, for a horse and a saddle. And then he had the idea and went through the effort to develop it. Put some real rough stairs, very little lighting, if none. In fact, I think from the old days, they said that he sold you a candle, and then when you went out of sight, they wish you good luck.
What did they call it back then?
Wonder Cave.
So it's been Wonder Cave
It's been
all
Wonder
this time.
Cave from the beginning.
That's great.
And I think that it played to our favor, really. But Wonder Cave, the old saying, you wander in, you wander out, and you wonder why you went, has been a popular saying. But that was when they sold you that candle, and you wandered through the cave, and you wandered back out. And I think that's where it really got its name, you know. So.
And then what year you put in an elevator, because now you go down in the cave and you come out through an elevator. When was that done?
That was done around 1968. We hand dug, could not blast, and it took almost 2 years to hand dig 80 some odd feet down an elevator shaft in solid rock. We did hit some pockets of open caves and stuff, which you still can see when you ride the elevator. The tower itself was purchased, actually it was given, we would take it away, from the University of Texas. Not University, Texas State.
Oh,
Back
really?
in Southwest Texas. It used
What
to be
was
the
it?
old water tower up on top of the hill. And they considered it an eyesore. And when they wanted it demoed and taken down, Dad was said, hey, I'll take it off your hands. And he reconstructed it, changed it around, and now it's a 110-foot observation tower. And he also bought the elevator from a place up on Lake Travis, which used to take you off the cliff straight down to the water edge. So he bought that elevator and had it installed, and they joined the two towers together. So the elevator tower goes all the way down 80 feet in the ground to pick you up out of the cave and lifts you up to 90 foot level. So you enter into the big 1,000 square foot room that's up there. So that's what we use. And then you can go on even higher to approximately 110 feet, 115 feet above ground level.
Your dad was pretty smart to figure out how to put those two things together, and he was an early recycler.
Well, what he had,
I mean, that's
he
amazing.
knew that he had a jewel. And the Earthquake Farm Cave is not like a water farm cavern by any means of imagination. There are over 2,000 water farm caverns throughout the United States. There were quite a few caverns of Sonora, Longhorn caverns. Natural Bridge was not there. Interface was not here. They came in much, much later. I think they've been in existence maybe 50 years now. So this was way before them. But to show off a fault line cave, you have to be able to explain it. People are learning. It's an educational based tour. You're seeing, touching, feeling what an earthquake is all about. Now, you want to see the results of that earthquake, you go above and you look down on it, and you can see what it did to the surface of the ground. You can see the ancient ocean beds, and all of this is exposed pretty rapidly on a tour of about an hour and 40 minutes. So, and then afterwards, we've added on the fun house they call the anti-gravity house. It's always been a popular thing. We bought the idea from Knox Berry Farm in California, brought it in, set it up. We then had the idea of fencing in our acreage around there, and started out with one deer.
I love the wildlife park.
Everybody does. Everybody.
Yeah.
Does. It was my idea. I forgot what
So you
year.
did the wildlife park?
No, my dad actually did the wildlife
Okay.
part. I did the mountain. That was my brainstorm. I'm the only guy you know who's ever built a mountain. But I wanted an entrance to that. I went to Tennessee, saw the mountain that they built out of foam. We also have one at Ocarina Springs that burned up all over the lake. And so when I wanted a mountain, I did not want to build it out of foam. That was the way they all did it. So I created an idea, and I pulled in Jeff Henry which just starting Sleeter Bond at that time. Jeff and I came up with a scheme on how we could do it out of concrete. Well, that idea worked well for me. Jeff built all of Sleeter Bond that way. He had also was hired by Disney World to go do Epcot and all of that mountain area. He did all that facing, and it's under our technique that we developed right here in San Marcos.
Wow.
And the mountain's still there, and it's not a crack in it.
And when
nothing.
did you put the mountain in?
It's 24 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I was a young man, climbed like a monkey up and down that thing and shape it. All I had was a photograph to go by. But we built it, and it came out.
And it's still in good shape.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, I know another interesting thing. I know that many college students, and my daughter, when she was in high school, you gave her first job, and she spent her summers at Wonder World in the snack bar. There's a long history of young people getting their first job at Wonder World.
That's
And
right.
college kids, I mean, hundreds.
You hear of teachers that have been teaching for so many years that they get to see the grandparent, the parents, and the grandchildren grow up while they're still teaching. Well, I've done the same. I've started out, I've had managers that I work with, their children have come to Texas State, they became my manager, and then I've had their children now work, and they became managers, because there's certain qualifications that you want as leaders. It seems like those same people, whatever that is, it's in the genes, man. Here it comes. But that's what you're looking for. I will probably have hosted training some 75 kids every year for 45 years, and what I finally got to the point I couldn't remember them. So I started a tradition in 1976, I think, of putting a dollar bill with their name up there. If they worked for me, I'd give them the dollar bill, let them write their whatever their sorority, fraternity, or whatever, as long as it wasn't vulgar, and we would stick it on the ceiling. And of course now the ceiling is almost covered with dollar bills from past employees, and we started putting photographs on them now.
Where's that ceiling?
In the main gift shop. When you come in to buy tickets, you look
up.
up.
I've seen that.
Yeah. People go, wow. It's sort of like what gave me kind of the idea. I went to out of state and went to New Mexico, and then you come back into
Route 66.
Yeah,
I've been there.
You go in there, and these dollar bills from everybody, you could go and crawl, would stick them on the wall. I said, well, that was a great idea to remember all my past employees.
Yeah.
So just about on 4th of July of every year, I walk out with a fresh bundle of ones and hand it to my employees and say, y'all go with marker lot pencils and photographs and stuff. Get them ready for me. I'm putting them on. So it's really a tradition now.
And I know tourism is one of our #1 industries here in San Marcos, and you were on the ground floor of helping to develop the tourism industry. You were recently awarded Lifetime Achievement Award for tourism. Can you share with us some of the highlights?
That was unexpected pleasure.
Well, some of the things you've seen over the years as tourism has evolved, and it's still one of our #1 industries here in San Marcos.
Well, it definitely is. It's one of the strongest. Well, when you add on the Outlet Mall being a tourism #1 tourism spot of the state of Texas,
ahead of the Alamo. That's
ahead of the Alamo.
That's amazing.
And then you take, of course, we've lost the springs. We have the meadows still, but it's not anywhere in its glory day. And then we have survived very well. So I'm real lucky to be right in the central part of Texas. It's kind of like a no-brainer, really.
Well, I don't know. I've seen you do a lot of hard work over the years. You're known as a leader in tourism locally and statewide as well. So
I'm glad to be there too. I've started out as the youngest in the tourism industry, obviously.
Yeah.
22 was a major responsibility, and now I'm probably amongst the older ones. Everyone is. It's really hard. I've gotten to see them all come through, retire before me. I'm going, what? But
Did your kids work at Wonder World? You have 3 kids.
All of our kids worked at Wonder World. They all took tours. They've all gone through higher education, and they all have done very, very well.
Now, where did you meet your wife, Karen? You've been married.
She came in and applied for a job.
I thought that had something to do with Wonder World.
Yes, that's
And you hired her, huh?
I did. I've never ever had a date with one of my employees or messed around.
She was a college student?
She walked in. I said, "Oh, well, I better not hire you."
She was in college. She was in college.
She was in college, and she caught my fancy. And
y'all been married how many years?
We're hit 40 years now.
Wow.
So we're still there, living on the grounds at the original homestead there. My dad built back in '61. We remodeled it, of course, and we still enjoy the wildlife park being in our back door. Pete the peacock or all the animals, the guineas and everything else that comes up there and sits on our back porch. It's really a zoo, but we love it. We really do. So,
Well, any closing thoughts about your many, many years in San Marcos and things you've seen that stand out in your mind?
well, I've always amazed at the San Marcos. It has grown so much. Population-wise, not so much as college-wise. Of course, this is it used to be a suitcase town. Everybody traveled to another town and came back to San Marcos to live. Now it's more a college town, so that's a big change as far as the ambiance of San Marcos. The town itself hasn't changed that much. We still have Hopkins Street, the only street that runs north and south, and all this additional traffic is on that one road. We have HEB, which covers pretty much the whole town now. It used to be everything from Randall's to everything, but it finally ended up HEB. Most of the downtown is turned into bars. Back in 56, 57, all the way up into the 60s, alcohol was not permitted and not sold inside the city limits of Santa Marcos.
I think it was the 70s when it.
Well, it might have been up to 70.
And didn't you open a bar at one point?
Oh yes, that was in 1972 when I first got the deal worked out with my parents to sell me the cave. Well, didn't have any cash, and we had a long winter in front of us, so we came up with a scheme of how to convert the gift shop. We wanted to still run the tourism part, but we wanted to get cash flow, so we decided to open up a disco. So we set the ticket counter where it is now, and made it a turntable style, had glass all around it. So at night, we would roll walls around, we would pull out tables and chairs, we had pool tables in the back, and we were going through, at the height, we would go through 13 kegs of beer at night. That was a very popular place. We would have 500 to 600 kids, and most of them were sorority and fraternity. Years after, when I closed it, they had no clue that that place was a tourism place or a cave. They'd walk in and see it, souvenirs everywhere, and the cave entrance over here, and they go, wait a minute, I was here, and it was called Underworld. Where is that? And so it was a fun thing. It's kind of night and day, though. I'd work all day long, then I'd go home, change clothes, come back, open up the bar, work at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, shut her down. There was never a break. That's one of the reasons I quit. Well, I didn't need to run it.
Woo, lots of changes over the years.
You bet. Of course, you know, the cave, the grounds itself has been beautified. Back in the old days, you know, if you had something like that, people were satisfied with, hey, it's okay base. Nowadays, everything is sophisticated. Everything has to be right to the top. And so that's where we are now. We've got stainless steel handrails throughout the entire cave. It's all, like I said, indirect lighting, no special effects, but you know, it does enhance the cave a lot as far as the look and what you see and how you see it. Putting shadows on different stratas and things of that nature. The tour has improved through lots of research. Of course, I've spent all these years, I've read, I've assisted in learning about the Balcones fault line. I'm not a geologist, but my dad was, and of course I have grown up with it. You know, up here, you know, and I love rocks. That's been always a favorite of mine and collection. So when my wife and I actually rebuilt the old homestead, we decided to take my rock collection that I had been just storing away in barns and infiltrate this thing into the rock work. And now that's that house is actually a rock museum. It's from rocks from all over the world. amethyst to quartz to selenite. You want to find it, you can find it in those walls. And also is one of the largest fossil collections ever assembled. It's in those walls too. So the house is a great museum for if you're
So
into
you
rocks.
live there and look over your life's work every day and
That's
say,
why I wanted to do it that
life's
way.
been good and I did good
Yes,
here in
ma'am.
San Marcos.
Well, I couldn't see the rocks and barrels. I know that. So this worked out.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much, buddy. It's been real interesting hearing your story, as I knew it would be.
Did I go now?
Yeah.
Did it stop raining?